We all know what a user story is, right? We use them every single day because it's the agile thing to do. But if you look at the Agile Manifesto, the latest version of a Scrum Guide, the Scrum Guide 2020, user stories not mentioned. And this creates a lot of confusion because everyone has their own definition of what a user story is. But don't get me wrong, user stories, if done correctly, beautiful thing, it allows developers to really create a user-centered product. But if done wrong, it can create a lot of issues down the line, and this is exactly what we'll talk about in this video. 7 mistakes that you might be doing right now when writing user stories. First off, let's define user story, which is the smallest unit of work in agile development. It's an informal, general explanation of a software feature written from the perspective of a user, of a customer. As a user, I want to add new pictures so I can easily share them with my followers. Simple user story that mention the what. What am I trying to do as the end user? And why am I doing it? Why am I uploading new pictures? So that I can share that with my followers. That's my why. User story, simple. Pro tip. What? Why? Forget about the how. The how the developers will tell you. As a product owner, write the what. What are you trying to do? What does the end user want to do? And why they want to do it? Mistake number 1. When writing user stories, you use the format so that feature instead of so that goal. Let's have a look at a good user story template I like using. As a user, I want to accomplish goal so that need is fulfilled. I want to talk about the last part, so that need is fulfilled. We're not talking about how to do it, no. We're talking about why in this section. Simple example, as a user, I want to find information concerning user stories. What? Want to find information concerning user stories so that I can write user stories. The first 2 parts, excellent. But the last part, needs some work so that I can write user stories. Yeah, it mentions the why. Why do I want to get information on user stories so that I can write user stories? Mentions clearly why the end user wants to find this information. But that's not enough. That can cause a lot of issues down the line if you use this format, this example, because it's not really talking about the why. Why does the user want to write the user story? Not for the sake of writing user story. No, they want to learn how to write user stories so that they can build products, features for customers, user-centered features. That's the real why. Not writing the user stories for the sake of writing user stories. So indeed, the format was used correctly. The why was mentioned, the what was mentioned, but the why, you need to go deeper. What's the real reason why they want to learn how to write user stories in order to build user-centered products? Mistake number 2, explaining the how instead of the why. We talked about that, so that goal, not how to do it. We need to the last part of a user story template, we're talking about the why. Why does the end user want to do it? Not what the end user wants to do. If you have a wish list in your product backlog of all the features, your user stories are simply a wish list of all the features you want to do, exactly how to do it. You're doing it wrong. It needs to be generic. It needs to be in some way a bit vague so that the team together can find a solution to meet this user's need. User story, yeah, it explains the user's need. A general explanation of a software feature from the perspective of a user. So as a product owner, if you start writing user stories, telling in the user story exactly what you want to do, what does the feature need to do from A to Z, you're doing it wrong. Leave it open. Don't tell the developers that this button needs to be green, that this button needs to be here. When I click on this button, this needs to happen. No, leave it open from the perspective of a user. What do I want to achieve? And let the experts, the designers, the developers provide a solution. Mistake number 3, being too vague. Yeah, on the opposite end, giving too many details. Technical details, exactly what you want to do. On the opposite end, you shouldn't be too vague. We are not in a writer's workshop here when writing a user story. We are not talking about real stories. It shouldn't be 1,000 words long. No, use the template we talked about earlier. You shouldn't get bored reading your user story. Keep it simple. The minimum amount of information that will convey the the end user. A particular end user, a particular customer who has a right on the application, let's say a retail customer. What does this user want to do and why they want to do it? That's it. It shouldn't be 1,000 words. I see a lot of product owners writing like paragraphs of user stories. No, split the user story into smaller user stories. If you feel that your user story is too boring when reading it, it means that it's too big. Split it down into smaller things, but don't do it alone. Talk with the developers. Talk with the team. Split the user stories together, because sometimes the product owner doesn't have a technical background to split a user story correctly. Mistake number 4, user stories that are non-negotiable. User stories are not precise, specific description of how a feature should play out. Oh, we talked about that previously. You wrote about the who and the what and the why. You're not talking about the how. Let the developers come up with the solutions. I see a lot of product owners doing this, making this mistake, talking about the how to do it in the what section. A simple example, as a user, I want to clear all notification buttons so that I can clear all my notifications. What's the issue with this user story? The what part. It includes the how to do it. A button. The button is the issue. Is this the only way to clear notifications in an application? I can think of another way, like you read the notification, and it automatically clears itself. That might be an easier option to build, and it's better solution for the end user. But why, as a product owner or the person writing the user story, are you including this how in the what section? You're restricting creativity. You're blocking, preventing the developers to come up with better solutions because you're mentioning that. Stop doing that. And a good way to know if you're doing that is ask the developers, is there a better way to do that? And we'll tell you, but the user story is written wrong. You shouldn't be including the way to do that in the user story. Leave it open, not too vague, not too technical. That's not the issue here. The issue is you're including the how to do it in the what section of a user story template. Mistake number 5, writing too vague or not writing any acceptance criteria. As I see many product owners falling into this trap, writing beautiful user stories without any acceptance criteria. It's in the name. What needs to happen for you, the product owner or the end user, to accept this development of a user story? It gives the developers an expectation, what is expected from them to complete, to get this user story to done. It complements, give additional information to the user story. You shouldn't be writing user stories and acceptance criteria, just rewording the user stories. No, two separate things. A simple example of a user story first. As a user, I want to receive a notification when someone adds a comment to my video so that I can keep updated. Now, the acceptance criteria, given that then, that's the format of the acceptance criteria. Given that I have the app open, the notification bell at the top should be highlighted and incremented as soon as a comment is posted on my video. Basically, the number in the notification bell should go up. Mistake number 6, writing user stories for faceless users. The template as a user, but you shouldn't be using this as a user when writing your user stories. No, this as a user needs to be someone specific using your application. The end user using your application. Build personas. Different types of people that use your application based on age, salary, interest, depending on what application you're trying to build, but different personas, and then build something for these different personas, because all these personas have different needs, different ways of using your application, and you can't really satisfy a customer if you don't even know who are your customers. And the first thing you need to do is build this persona. Do interviews, you do user surveys, build this persona first. Once you know who are your customers, you can start writing user stories for them, not for as a user. Mistake number 7, something that we talked about briefly earlier, letting product owners write the user stories alone. Split the user stories alone, write the acceptance criteria alone. No, it's a team job. The whole team should be involved. The developers have ideas on how to write user stories. They can help writing acceptance criteria, but the most important part is the splitting part. Sometimes the product owner doesn't have a technical background or technical know-how to split the user stories correctly. So involve everyone when writing user stories. If you're having a hard time writing the user story as a product owner, involve the team. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you don't prevent them, distract them from completing their sprint goal in the sprint. Remember that, which brings me to my next point. If you want more tips, insights on Agile Scrum personal growth, click on the video that stands out the most on the screen right now, and I'll see you in a few seconds.